Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Up first, President Joe Biden has declared the wildfires in Maui a disaster. At least 36 people have died and the town of Lahaina destroyed. Here in BC, travelers have been returning from Hawaii today. We'll hear from some of them, and we're asking you, how are you feeling seeing the wreckage in Maui? And what role should British Columbians play in helping? After 12:30, we'll take your calls on the passing of legendary rock icon Robbie Robertson. I'm Michelle Eliot. This is BC Today. Thank you for joining us on CBC Radio 1, live streaming as well on CBC Gem, cbc.ca/BC, and on the CBC Vancouver YouTube page. Welcome to you. Well, in the last hour, U.S. President Joe Biden announced he has approved a major disaster declaration for the deadly wildfires in Hawaii. This is to get aid to the state. Wildfires on the island of Maui have claimed at least 36 lives, and homes and buildings have been burned to the ground. The residents have lost a lot, and for British Columbians, the images of fires ripping through streets and grasslands are shocking to see. So many have visited the island. And this morning, distraught travelers returned to Vancouver Airport.
We were about 10 minutes away from the fire, and we were probably the last people that were there because we were just there the night before the fire started. And so we checked out of a hotel and didn't really have a place to stay, and ended up Westin Resort allowed us to just stay in their lobby. So we pulled out one of those suntan chairs and just slept last night, and then the next day, so this was yesterday, we just ended up driving our rental car on the northern route of the island. It took us about 2 hours to get there. It's a pretty treacherous road. It's not recommended to travel on that road, but they opened that road one way for everyone to get out.
It was stressful. There wasn't a lot of information that was sent to us. We just waited at the airport. We slept there and just waited. That's all we could really do. It's sad because things in Maui are changing quickly.
So you could feel, this feeling from Vancouver a few years ago. We had this fire, so it was very familiar smell. Felt like home. Bad joke, I guess. It was like we were away from the fire. We were only maybe 2 kilometers from the fire, but we could see it coming down the hills from the highlands part of Maui.
It was very scary. I'm not gonna lie. It was pretty harrowing, and your dream vacation turns into something like this. You didn't know, but at least we weren't affected. The people there are having it a lot worse. Their homes, their livelihoods. Those art galleries, everything's lost and burnt. So I think we got out lucky.
Those were some voices of travelers arriving at YVR this morning. And we're joined now by one of them. And Olivia Hung is back home safe in Richmond now, but was in Maui when the fire broke out. Olivia, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, hello.
I'm glad to hear that you are home safe and sound now. I can imagine how exhausted you must be from what you've been through.
Yeah, it's been a lot. I'm really tired right now.
Yeah.
Probably gonna go to sleep after this.
I'm sure. And thank you very much for taking our call. Can you tell us where you were when you learned about the fire?
I was in Lahaina. I was staying at my friend's house because I'm visiting them. That was why I was there. It was sort of like a trip also to catch up with them. And when I learned of the fires, of course, there was no electricity, there was no signal, there was no water or anything. So when I learned of the fires was when I actually saw the fires through the window.
Okay, so there was no electricity even before you learned that there was this wildfire?
Yeah, the electricity turned off at around 5 a.m. in the morning.
Well, can you tell us what you did see?
I saw it was the roof was blown off on the lawn, that was before the fires. And when I saw the fires, we saw a lot of smoke, the whole sky was smoke. You couldn't see anything else but the smoke, and you can see red from the fires.
Oh my goodness, what was going through your mind?
I was really worried. We were like, we did not know when to evacuate. We were just sort of trapped because like no service, nothing. We don't know what's going on. We could like, it was like a waiting game. We can only sit there and wait.
And where were you? What were you doing then? Were you trying to pack things up or getting ready to go?
Um, at one point, I was packing for my flight because my flight was yesterday.
Hmm.
My friends started packing for the evacuation because they thought it was going to turn serious. So I'm actually really glad we all started packing so we were prepared to leave when the police came to tell us to evacuate.
Okay, so the police did come at some point to tell you to leave.
Yeah,
Okay, and what did they tell you?
they just said the fires were going to like reach here and to go towards like Kihei or Kahului.
Okay, was there were there evacuation centers there?
No, they just told us to head in that area. They
Just
like
go.
weren't
Okay.
really like precise about it. They just told us to get out of the area really quickly.
I imagine very urgently. And were you ever worried that your friend's home would be affected?
Not really, because like they've had this happen before where they had to evacuate, so they were like thinking it's probably gonna be fine. I remember they were like collecting stuff from near the doorway and putting it in the room for safekeeping because during like the strong winds, our door was broken, so we were pretty much trapped inside, and in the end we had to leave through the windows.
You had to leave through the windows.
Yeah.
So what was it like getting out then, and where did you go?
It was really hectic when like we had a lot of stuff. One of our friends made multiple trips downstairs and upstairs to load the car.
Hmm.
And my friend has three cats, and one of them was really anxious. He was hiding under the couch. At the last moment, she was like turning the couches upside down, trying to find a cat, and I was freaking out, wondering if we would get out on time. And then once we got in the car, we drove to near Kahului where we got signal, and then we started calling possible people in the area, asking them if we could stay with them. And in the end, we stayed with my friend's mom's best friend, and they are still there at this moment.
They're still there. I can imagine you just said it was very hectic. What did it look like on the roads around you?
The roads, it was just there was a lot of cars pulled over because some people they had nowhere to go. They could like only like just sit at the side of the road and wait.
Yeah.
And then there were like power lines that were down. I remember we had to drive over one and we were really scared because we didn't know if it was gonna explode or not.
Oh my goodness. That must have been so frightening.
Yeah, it's also my first trip alone without like my family. So I like it's just a whole new experience, and then this happened. So it's like really shocking to me right now still.
I won't take up too much more of your time, Olivia. What was it like getting home? Did you get on the flight that you had been scheduled for?
No, that flight got canceled. I
Okay.
booked like this one last minute. It was like around $900, but like I felt like I should like go home because I didn't want to be on the island taking up resources, and I also
Mm.
didn't know if the flames were gonna flare up again because like when I was leaving, there was still like fire in like Lahaina and other areas.
How long did you have to wait for a flight?
My flight was delayed. It was supposed to take off at like around 9:30 or 10, but in the end it took off at like 1 a.m. So like I got to the airport at around 7 and I was just like sitting around waiting, really anxious. I was really scared I was gonna get canceled again.
Oh my. How do you feel being home now?
I'm really relieved, really tired, but
Yeah.
like I'm glad I still have a home to go to because my friends, their house burned down. Like everyone I know, their homes burned down. And like I'm looking through like my vacation pictures and it's like so hard because knowing like all of those places are gone now, it was probably like the last time I'll ever go there. And it's never gonna be the same again.
So the friend you stayed with, their home has burned down.
Yeah, she's like lived in Lahaina all her life. She's like native and her house is now gone. Her job is gone. Like her job was like near Front Street and like Front Street was like one of the most affected areas.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
Yeah, it's really shocking. Yeah, we're just glad that everyone is okay and the pets are okay because some of our friends they had to leave without their pets, which is devastating for them.
Olivia, thank you so much. I know that you are just exhausted from the ordeal you've been through, and I know that you mentioned that you wanted to leave so as not to take up any more resources as people in Maui, on Maui, deal with the aftermath of this. Thank you so much, and I hope that you are able to rest for the day and that you feel safe being home. Thank you so much for your time.
Of course, I'm glad I had the opportunity to tell my story. Thank you for having me.
You take care, okay?
Okay.
Olivia Hung has just returned home to Richmond from Maui. We want to hear from you now. What goes through your mind seeing the devastation on the island of Maui? A major disaster has been declared now by U.S. President Joe Biden. And given British Columbians' very close relationship with Hawaii and Maui, how do you feel about what you're seeing? And what role do you think British Columbians should play in recovery and rebuilding? Love to hear from you. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, star or pound 690 on your cell phone. And if you have family or friends on Maui right now trying to get out, you can call us with your questions, as we're joined right now by travel consultant Mackenzie McMillan. He's been good enough to join me here in our studio. Hi, Mackenzie. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
What goes through your mind hearing from Olivia?
I mean, it's just horrible to hear it, and I think that so many British Columbians visit Maui. I don't think there's anyone that's visited there that won't have some form of emotional connection to specifically that part of the island that's been so greatly affected. I know I get choked up when I see the aerial footage of what's happened to Lahaina. It's a very special place for a lot of people, and it's devastating to see what's happened.
It sure is. I have my own memories, and to think about that town, just such a vibrant town, to have been destroyed. What about, let's perhaps just give out some information, practical information for people. What do they need to know right now if they know someone who's still on Maui?
Yeah, so most of the airlines are trying to work as quickly as possible to deal with what's going on there. So most of the airlines have already canceled all flights going into Maui. The government of Hawaii, as well as the tourism authority, have strongly urged people to stay away from the island of Maui. While other islands remain open, Maui is completely closed. We haven't seen any official word from a number of the airlines yet. However, a number of the U.S. carriers have already stated that they are going to be adding additional flights to evacuate people from Maui, either back to the mainland of the United States or to Oahu. We did see this morning Air Canada had put on larger aircraft, so larger than their normal flights, to try to accommodate additional guests that are still in Maui that were either scheduled to fly out today or in the last few days while flights were canceled, or are scheduled to fly out in the days ahead. So best thing to do is to check with your airline. If you are in Maui, the only thing that I could probably suggest is just to go to the airport. I know it may seem daunting to stay sitting around at the airport, but that's going to be your best bet, because the most up-to-date information is going to be coming directly from the counter agents at the airport.
Right, that will be the most recent information for sure, just like what Olivia did and just waited until that flight was ready to go.
That's right.
And what about for people who have tickets booked over the next week or so?
Yeah, so I would say at this point right now, most of the airlines are issuing waiver programs, which basically means that they'll allow you to cancel your flight or rebook it without penalties or fees. You have to check with each airline. Every airline will have a different policy. So the best thing you can do is to check with the airline. We're still waiting to get information from most of the Canadian carriers, but obviously it's an incredibly fluid situation. And this has happened so fast. We're still within 24 hours really of the main brunt of this situation taking place. So if you have a flight within the next week, I would strongly recommend calling your airline provider as well as your hotel operator. So if you're staying at any of the major hotels that are on the west side of Maui, or actually the entire island of Maui at this point, your best bet would be to check with the hotel and see if they've released any new policies or procedures.
Okay, is that going to be challenging right now because communications have been affected?
Yeah, so I would say with most of the hotel companies, they're actually operated by larger international chains. So if you're staying at any of the hotels that are generally popular with Canadian travelers, so Hyatt's, any Marriott properties, which include Westin and Sheraton as well, you can try to contact them through their general reservations, which won't be in Maui. It'll likely be in the mainland U.S. That would be your best bet, or just check online and see if they've updated anything. But it may be a day or two before you're able to get real information.
Okay, a really good advice. And if you have any questions for Mackenzie about a trip that you have planned, or perhaps you have loved ones still on the island of Maui, you can give us a call, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, star or pound 690 as well. You can email us to bctoday@cbc.ca. And we're taking your calls on just your reaction. What goes through your mind as you watch the devastation, just the visuals, the images of those fires and the winds that are carrying those fires, have carried those fires across the island as well. What goes through your mind? British Columbians, of course, have experience with wildfire here, and many have visited Maui as well. So we'd love to hear your reaction. James is calling us from Vancouver. Hi, James. Welcome to the show.
Yes, thanks a lot for taking my call, Michelle.
Sure.
So I guess I have to say that my predominant reaction to everything that's been happening and the issue in Hawaii in particular is that I'm completely terrified about what's happening. I'm almost 70 years old. I've been following the climate issue my entire life. I've been an observer of the climate issue. I've educated myself about it, and it's really terrifying because. A lot of these things were predicted quite a long time ago by scientists who were employed by the oil industry, and it's just a lot of this stuff was predicted to happen a long time ago, or pardon me, it was predicted that it might happen, and if we didn't do anything back then, it may be too late, to undo the consequences of what's going on. So I don't really. I don't want to sound too pessimistic, but I don't really see a way out of this. And the climate mitigation narrative, I really think it's great that people are kind of working in that area. But to me, it's based on what I know and what I've learned about the whole situation is that it's sort of like standing on a train track with a sign that says stop to a freight train that's like 3 miles long and it's 100 yards away. This should have been taken care of 30 years ago when we had the time and the energy to fix it, because now it's going to cost 100 times more just to cope with the devastation. And I think that's going to completely destroy the global banking system and the insurance industry. The insurance industry, you can't insure a home in California now against fire. It's not possible.
The climate change conversation is one to be had for sure, James. We've seen really wildfires as a story all throughout the summer in many parts of the world, extreme heat as well. And so the impacts of climate change are being felt, I imagine, by the tourism industry. Mackenzie, what impact has that had on you? What has your summer been like dealing with visitors as they travel to places like Maui, like Greece that saw extreme heat earlier this summer?
Yeah, it's been a long conversation in our industry, especially since the pandemic. Just as we've gotten busy again and started to recover, is that climate change is going to be a major issue going forward with travel. And we've seen it with the countless flight cancellations and delays due to extreme weather, extreme heat, forest fires. We've even seen them here in Canada with flights being canceled just because they're restricting airspace for firefighting. This is a great example of that, unfortunately, in Maui. And we're likely to see it going forward. And for people who are continuing to travel, this is where things like travel insurance are going to be vital, because the unpredictable is becoming more predictable. And so we have to be aware of that.
I see you looking at the images right now of the fires and those flames just really just whipping through and really smoke all over the streets. We are airing some right now on our live stream. If you'd like to go to cbc.ca/BC or YouTube as well, CBC Vancouver is where you can find us, or you can use CBC Gem. And can I ask you then, is there a conversation? Tourism is such a big part of Hawaii's economy, and it's going to be impacted. At the same time, is there conversation in the tourism industry about the role of airlines and airplane fuel when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions and cruise ships, for example? Is there any conversation about that?
Absolutely, yeah. And a lot of airlines and cruise lines specifically have started new initiatives to try to make their product more green and more climate friendly. A great example would be with cruise lines. Cruise lines have always had a reputation of being big polluters, not really being great for the oceans that they sail in. And what we're starting to see is a lot of cruise lines developing new technology to be hybrid with fuel and electric. And we actually are seeing some smaller cruise lines. Unfortunately, the technology is not there yet for the major super cruise ships, but for the smaller cruise lines, for all electric ships. And so I think that that's part of the conversation. And for airlines, obviously jet fuel is a necessity for putting planes in the air. But it's definitely become something that the industry has become much more aware of and really striving to try to reach goals in the future.
Do you get those questions from customers?
We do, yeah. And we are seeing a huge increase in interest in sustainable travel. So maybe avoiding the big resort or avoiding the big cruise ship and going for something that is a bit more environmentally sound or environmentally sustainable, or something that is more in touch, so you're more in touch with the community that you're visiting. So we are seeing some real shifts in passenger and client, the way that they travel.
Well, it's interesting. You know, we heard from Olivia, who traveled to Maui, her first trip alone, and she said it's really affected her. She's exhausted and distraught after this trip, has now returned to Richmond, but she said she wanted to get out because she didn't want to use up any more resources as they struggle with these fires. And there is that conversation around the impact of tourism on these islands, using up resources. There's a call from locals in Hawaii to be more sustainable, be responsible as visitors. What role can British Columbians play now then?
Well, I think it's just really important for people to remember that when we're traveling, we're not going to a playground. We are going to someone's home. Vancouver is a great example itself. Vancouver is not a tourism dependent, but it's a very tourist heavy city. But we all live here too. And so I think that we need to take the approach of, when people visit Vancouver, how do we want them to behave to respect where we live, where we call home? And then we have to take those ideals and apply them to when we travel. And especially for places like a place like Maui, which is much smaller, obviously, much smaller population and much more dependent on their natural beauty, that we just come in and respect it, because we want that place to be there forever. We want to be able to go back again. And we want people that travel after us to enjoy it and have the same experience as we do. So I think the most important thing is just to remember that we're always guests in these places.
Yeah, that's a really important point, isn't it? Well put. The images are shocking for people who have visited, as you said, the island of Maui. And you may be wondering, how could this have happened? Well, we reached out to an expert on this. Lori Daniels is a forest ecologist at the UBC Faculty of Forestry. And I spoke with her this morning for some context on how the weather there has caused this fire season. Take a listen.
Well, as we've been experiencing here in BC, they're having a very hot and dry summer. And as well, they're being affected by the winds coming off of a cyclone that is in the Pacific Ocean south of Hawaii that's generating extremely strong winds. So when the ignitions happened, they were buffered by winds that were 55 to 80 miles per hour. These are hurricane force winds under hot, dry conditions. And they just started whipping up the fire and carrying both fire, burning embers, and spreading that fire across the landscape and into the communities.
Have we seen this kind of pattern before elsewhere?
We've seen extreme fires, and we've seen fires that are becoming less predictable, more intense, more fast-moving under these extreme hot, dry conditions. And, of course, the wind. These wind-driven fires are the ones that put our homes and communities and lives at risk so frequently. To me, it's reminiscent of the conditions that we saw during the heat dome in 2021 in the town of Lytton, that was devastated by fire, also under hot, dry, and very windy conditions. Once fires start on one structure and it generates enough heat and embers and sparks coming off, carried by the wind, it becomes contagious, catching the next building and the next building on fire, and really under conditions that are essentially impossible to stop the fire.
And this seems to have been a summer of wildfires in so many parts of the world. In Hawaii, this is not something that was was very common. People are very surprised at how much this has spread, how quickly. What's been happening with the ecology there?
Well, we know in Hawaii, although there's, fires have been reported to us. Fires, they're unusual. It's a tropical country. It has a climate system, although there's a lot of diverse ecosystems even within the Hawaiian Islands, and areas that are drier and wetter on the windward and leeward side of islands, kind of like the coastal portion of BC that's so much wetter than the interior dry portions. You get the same windward, leeward effects on the Hawaiian Islands. So there are regions of Hawaii that are much drier and more fire prone, but fires are not common in the types of events that we have seen in the last 24 to 48 hours on Maui and the fires that are currently burning on other islands as well. If you had asked me to name, a top 10 place where I thought there was going to be a fire of this magnitude and this consequence, Hawaii wouldn't have been on my top 10 list. So it's shocking to me as it is to others.
That's Lori Daniels, a forest ecologist with UBC's School of Forestry, the Faculty of Forestry there. And Mackenzie, thank you so much for providing some context as well for travelers as they consider or think about what their plans are over this summer. Thank you very much for joining us.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Mackenzie McMillan is a travel consultant with the Travel Group. It's 12:31 now, 1:31 in the Mountain Time Zone. You're with BC Today here on CBC Radio 1, live streaming as well on cbc.ca/BC and on your CBC Gem app as well. You can find us on YouTube. Just search CBC Vancouver. Good to have you with us. I'm Michelle Eliot. And coming up in our next half hour, legendary Canadian musician Robbie Robertson has died at the age of 80. Now, he influenced so many musicians as well as garnered legions of fans. We're taking your calls. You can share your own memories of his music with the band or on his own. That's coming up after the CBC News Update with Michelle Morton.
Good afternoon. Here are the headlines from the CBC Vancouver newsroom. BC prosecutors have dropped cases against 146 Fairy Creek protesters over the RCMP's handling of the arrests. The BC Prosecution Service says the case's ability to succeed was in doubt after a Supreme Court ruling acquitted one of the protesters earlier this year. That decision says officers only read part of a court order to demonstrators instead of the full text. A judge says that shortened version did not give protesters enough information to understand the order they were accused of breaking. This comes hours after the Supreme Court of Canada said it would not hear the Crown's appeal of a protester's acquittal. Construction at Vancouver International Airport has paused after crews found what are believed to be Musqueam artifacts. YVR's president says they were found in the early morning hours last Wednesday in the southern half of Sea Island. The airport sits on Musqueam traditional territory. And much of BC may be experiencing cloudy skies and some cooler temperatures, but the Minister of Emergency Management, Bowen Moth, says that could change dramatically later in the week. Heat warnings are expected to be triggered. Parts of the southern interior could see temperatures into the high 30s, but Moth says there are no indications the heat wave will reach the level of the heat dome in 2021. In the local forecast, clouds are expected to clear today, highs of 21 and partly cloudy this evening with a low of 14. Now back to BC Today with Michelle Eliot.
Thank you very much, Michelle. That's Michelle Morton from the CBC Vancouver newsroom. And welcome back. You are with BC Today here on CBC Radio 1, live streaming on CBC Gem, cbc.ca/BC, and on the CBC Vancouver YouTube page. It's now 12:34, 1:34 in the Mountain Time Zone. As you likely have been hearing, Canadian musician Robbie Robertson died Wednesday at the age of 80. Now, he was the guitarist and main songwriter for the Canadian-American rock group The Band, and he leaves behind an extensive body of work, including working as Bob Dylan's lead guitarist, countless hits from his time with the band, and his own solo work as well. From Joni Mitchell to Neil Diamond, tributes have been pouring in to commemorate the legendary musician. Now, Robbie Robertson spoke to CBC while promoting his memoir Testimony in 2016. Here's some of that interview.
One of the big differences with a group like The Band is we started out, I was 16 years old when I joined Ronnie Hawkins and the Hawks. And in the beginning, it was Levon Helm and me in the Hawks. And then we brought in Rick Danko, Richard Manuel, Garth Hudson. And when we were a unit, something happened. We were on a wavelength. And as we played the Chitlin circuit down south, as we played all over the place, we were gathering music. We were gathering sounds. We were gathering rhythms. And we were incorporating this into our own music. And over a period of time, there was depth to it. You know, all of a sudden you could hear tinges of gospel music and mountain music and blues and rhythm and blues and rock and roll and all of these things coming together. And then after joining up with Bob Dylan, then there was that influence of what he was discovering. And so all of these pieces of that puzzle started fitting together over a period of time. And when we made our first record, Music from Big Pink, people were like, where did this come from?
We would like to hear from you today. What are your own memories, your thoughts on the passing of Canadian rock legend Robbie Robertson? Do share them with us. What's your favorite song from the band or many of his other musical ventures? Prolific indeed. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, or you can dial up star or pound 690. And you can send us an email to bctoday@cbc.ca. Your thoughts on Robbie Robertson. And to take your calls, we're joined now by Michael Barkley. He's a music journalist and best-selling author of Hearts on Fire, 6 years that changed Canadian music from 2000 to 2005. He also writes Airplane on the Highway, which is a music newsletter that heavily features Canadian artists. Michael, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me today.
You actually have written on the passing of Robbie Robertson. Tell us, what did his music mean to you?
I think he meant a lot to me as someone from a younger generation, as his work with the band and therefore every member of the band, what they accomplished in their time as a Canadian band, as a band that formed, playing up and down the 401 highway in Ontario, playing all the small towns, all the roadhouses, you know, not just on Yonge Street in Toronto, but all the small towns in Ontario.
Yeah.
And then by a series of circumstances, getting scooped up by Bob Dylan, going to New York, and then making two really unique records that made the Beatles jealous, that kind of turned the world on their head and said, how did this happen?
Yeah.
And then they ended up on the cover of Time magazine. They played before 600,000 people at a festival in New York. They were huge, and that's something that I don't think a lot of later generations fully appreciate outside of watching The Last Waltz and seeing their connections to different facets of North American music. I mean, they're a Canadian band, first and foremost, with an American drummer, but they're really a North American band, reflecting all the music that comes out of this continent specifically.
It's amazing that you brought up Bob Dylan. There are so many of those really famous names that have been influenced or just gave recognition to the band. Eric Clapton wanted to play with them, I think.
Yeah, and Eric Clapton suffered at the hands of Robbie Robertson in a guitar duel during The Last Waltz. It's pretty clear who the better guitar player is. So I'm not a Clapton fan, but it's no, I mean, different facets of musicians appreciated what they did. You know, like I said, they made the Beatles jealous. The Beatles heard music from Big Pink, and they thought, how do we make music that sounds like that?
Yeah.
How can we get Ringo to drum like that? How can George Harrison play guitar like that? What can we learn from this music? And those first couple of records in particular, they were very much a rejection of what was going on. I mean, the late 60s, early 70s, there was a lot of, guitar hero nonsense, a lot of like screaming at the top of your lungs, and a lot of ego-driven music. And the band were not that. The band were not a band with one lead singer. They had three.
Right.
So did the Beatles, for that matter. But it was generally still unconventional. Robbie Robertson was known in Toronto in the late 50s, early 60s as being the hottest guitars. Like all the young guitarists in Toronto would like press against the stage to watch what he was doing and try to figure out what he was doing because he was that good. But once he joined the band, like he wasn't a showboating guitarist. Like he was like, I am one of 5 people. And, it's not to say he didn't display what he was capable of occasionally, but it was very much in the context of what the other people in that band could do. And that's what really made them different, as opposed to there being one star in that group.
Yeah, he talked about them being a unit, right? In that clip that we just aired. It's interesting. We were just playing some video of some visuals from the video of his solo attempt, actually, which is one of my favorite songs. Not an attempt, of course. It was a very famous song, Somewhere Down the Crazy River. There it is right now. We're playing the visuals from that video. That's a song that I just love. And the blues influence in that is just so notable as well. We are asking for your thoughts and your memories of Robbie Robertson. And you can give us a call, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, star or pound 690 as well. And you can email bctoday@cbc.ca. Roman is joining us from Port Alberni. Hi, Roman. Welcome back.
Hi, good afternoon.
Yes.
Hi. Hope everyone's doing well today.
Doing just fine. Thank you so much. Good to hear from you. What are your own memories of Robbie Robertson?
Well, it's not a memory of an event or thing, but a memory of the juggernaut that he was to enter into such a tremendously competitive industry, the music industry.
Yes.
Rise from the depths of nowhere and then rub shoulders with so many powerhouses throughout the world stage. And if I could just offer a quick correction, I'm pretty sure he would have liked to say his band is not from North America, but a Turtle Island band.
Yes.
And I want to address that right now.
Absolutely.
I am very biased to indigenous artists and the people who struggle to enter into the main stages and get a spotlight shared with those that have a really powerful voice and a really powerful presence. He did it in spades, and he did such a tremendous job, and I really hope he trailblazed for many, many, many people who have the same dreams and aspirations. I just want to add one more thing here is a comment he made, if I'm allowed to play it, from a trailer that I found about the documentary Rumble.
You have it.
Something he says, yes, it's right here.
Okay.
There's something he said that really stuck with me, and I want to play it for you right now.
Sure, yes.
The expression, be proud you're an Indian, but be careful who you tell. Can you hear?
We couldn't make it out. If you can tell us what he said there.
He said, there's a key expression, be proud that you're an Indian, but be careful who you tell. And to have to navigate those kind of waters, and then to become the icon that he is, I really hope he left a number of valuable lessons, not only for us Indigenous, but for any artists that are in that field or that industry, to welcome diversity, welcome those novel ideas and those new things that maybe don't quite hit right, but then they eventually become the main beat or the main sort of chorus or the harmony, if you will. But that's what I remember of him, is he made room for us to be part of the harmony.
Yes, his mother was Mohawk and Cayuga, and he spent time on the Six Nations of the Grand River Reserve growing up. Something that I heard was a conversation. He told a story about talking to his mother when he was young and saying, I would like to grow up to be a storyteller. And she said, I think you will. Yeah.
Watch him in the show Rumble. You'll love it.
I will watch that show, Roman. Thank you so much for bringing that to the conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. That's Roman joining us from Port Alberni. We're taking your calls, your own thoughts, your memories, and your thoughts about Robbie Robertson, of course, legendary, iconic Canadian musician, Indigenous as well, Mohawk and Cayuga descent. And we'd love to hear from you. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. Thank you so much to Roman for that really good important part of this conversation. Sandy is joining us now from Delta. Hi, Sandy.
Hi, how are you?
I am fine. Thanks so much for calling. What did you want to say?
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I just wanted to say that I came into Robbie's music late in life, but I really, really enjoyed the Once We Were Brothers film that's been on Crave lately. I watch that every time it's on. It's an amazing feature.
Okay. And what did you learn? What was it that drew you to his music later in life?
Just his honesty and his just his storytelling and the way he wrote music was just great. Always very nice.
Is there a song that stands out for you, Sandy?
Well, yesterday I was listening to a song that he wrote called "It's a Good Day to Die," and it's from one of his solo albums, and it really hit me hard yesterday. And it's a great song if anyone wants to look it up and listen to it.
Well, thank you very much. It's so nice to hear from you and the influence that he had on you, and even discovering it later on in life too. What impact his music had on you. Thank you so much for joining us, Sandy.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Good to hear from you in Delta. Our numbers again: 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, star or pound 690. And you can email us bctoday@cbc.ca. My guest is Michael Barclay, music journalist and best-selling author of Hearts on Fire, 6 Years That Changed Canadian Music from 2000 to 2005. And his music newsletter about Canadian artists is called Airplane on the Highway. What did you make of what you've heard there from our two callers, Sandy and Roman?
It's really interesting because they both talked about Robertson's post-band career.
Right.
He's most famous for being in the band, but he did a lot of film work for Martin Scorsese. The last thing he worked on is a film with an Indigenous theme that comes out later this year called Killers of the Flower Moon. And in 1994, I think was the first time he really spoke quite openly about his Indigenous heritage. And he put out an album called Music for the Native Americans, which featured people of his generation like Rita Coolidge, and also younger people at that time, people like the Innu Quebecois band Kashtin.
Yes.
And that record was very interesting and kind of blew open a lot of people's perception of what Indigenous music was. And I think that kind of got lost in the sands of time because there's definitely been an Indigenous renaissance in recent years, and people tend to forget about little blips of interest that happened just even like 2 or 3 decades ago. But at the time, I think that was a very significant record. And then the one time I interviewed him was for a record later in the 90s. By the way, I meant to mention It's a Good Day to Die is from that record, Music for the Native Americans that the caller mentioned.
Okay.
The one time I interviewed him was for an electronic Indigenous record he put out in 1998 called Contact from the Underworld of Red Boy.
Wow.
And ahead of its time, really, for mixing Indigenous music and influences with electronic music, at least, like I think 15 years before Hallucination and Tribe Called Red and other people were doing something similar. So he was very interested in innovating as well as simultaneously connecting to the past, which is something he did in the band in a very different way. And then as he got older, his Indigenous heritage was more a part of his public identity in ways that I don't think it really was in the 70s. It wasn't until later that he really brought that to the forefront.
Let's talk about, we're talking about post the band, but one of their most famous songs, The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down, one of the most famous songs about the American Civil War. It's written by Robbie Robertson, and we do have a clip from it right now.
Virgil Kane is the name, and I served on the Danville train. To Stoneman's cavalry came, and they tore up the tracks again. In the winter of '65, we were hungry, just barely alive. By May 10th, Richmond had fell.
That is The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down. And let's get some more context on that, Michael. You know, what can you tell us about how this song came about?
I'm not sure where that clip came from, or maybe I wasn't hearing it correctly, but that sounded like a demo version or vocal only version. So I'm not sure what that. Anyway, the song itself is it's one of their best known songs, and it's one of their most controversial songs. It's a song about a Southerner in the American Civil War, so on the losing side of history, in a war fought over slavery. But it's meant to be a sympathetic portrayal of someone caught up in a war, in watching their town being ravaged by an invading force. Of course, that's really politically loaded, and there's been a lot of discussion more recently about the song that I don't think existed when it came out. But he wrote it for Levon Helm to sing. Levon Helm was the drummer, and he was the sole American in the band, and he was from Arkansas, the Deep South. Yeah, I mean, we could have a whole call-in show just about that song, I think, and it makes sense. But it was one of their biggest hits. Joan Baez also had a hit with it. But it's very interesting to hear a liberal Canadian write a sympathetic song about a Southerner in the American Civil War.
The controversial and, as you say, the politically charged. Let's take another call now from Howard in Ladner. Hi, Howard. What are your thoughts, your memories of Robbie Robertson?
Hello. Well, first thing, I was in the Navy in Ottawa in the early 60s, and one night I saw that Ronnie Hawkins was playing at a place called the Libu, and went there to see him. Of course, I didn't know that anything about the Hawks at that time, but Robbie Robertson would have been there at that point. Then about 10 years later, I was doing a lot of music in Halifax, television work like Sing Along Jubilee and stuff like that, but I also had a band, and we didn't want to do just, pop rock, the popular stuff that would normally be played in bars, and yet so it was a bit of a struggle to get a mix of the stuff that we would like most to do, along with the stuff that people wanted to hear. And sort of one of the go-to groups we went to was the band, because they stood out, first of all, in quality,
right,
and really interesting music that was not the pop 40 kind of mundane stuff that you would hear.
He wanted something different, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean, and everything about them, the quality of the writing of Robbie Robertson, and then the instrumentation and the arrangements, they were totally different from everything that had happened before. And I think one would hear quite often the term musicians, and I think that was the case with the band. The musicians really looked up to and respected the band, and that was applied to us. And we would, I remember one of the songs we did was King Harvest Has Surely Come. Well, I don't think any other bands on the road were bar bands were doing songs like that. But they were really interesting songs and something different and almost kind of more intellectual or something but the quality of the music as well as the lyrics.
Musician, just like yourself. We've heard so much about the influence, right, on subsequent musicians and peers as well. Howard, thanks very much for the call from Ladner.
You're welcome.
Take care. Mark is up in Delta now. Hi, Mark.
Hi there. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, and you're a lifelong fan.
Yeah, definitely. I'm a collector. I collect records. I still have all the old band records and a lot of Robbie's newer stuff as well.
Yes.
Yeah, you bet.
Why is he so special to you?
Well, I'm Indigenous myself, and he's always been an inspiration. The way he tells stories, the way the band and he crafts music is unique in the music world, and even his cinematic stuff is just amazing as well.
Right. Has his music been part of your life in a special way too?
Yeah, I was just about to say that one of his songs on his album Contact from the Underworld of Red Boy was my wedding song.
Oh, wow. Oh, my goodness. Yeah. And why did you choose that one?
Well, the song is called Unbound. It's a song that probably nobody knows except for diehard Robbie fans. And it's my wife and I chose that song because it meant something to us. It's a very romantic song, I think, about unconditional love, and yeah, it just seemed appropriate and different than what most people might have as a wedding song, I guess.
Well, it's such a lovely story, Mark, and so great to hear from a really staunch fan too, like yourself. Thanks so much for the call.
Thank you, Michelle.
So great to hear that. Peter writes as well, I was so sad to see the passing of Robbie Robertson. I was lucky enough to see the band in concert back in the day and have been a fan for many years of both the group, but also Robbie Robertson's solo music. Without the band, we wouldn't have had music like Elton John's Tumbleweed Collection, George Harrison's early solo work, Bob Dylan's great early 70s albums, etc., etc. His music will always be played in my home, I'm sure in many others. What a talent. Let's go back to Michael Barkley now, just for a quick comment. How would you describe his music to the new generation? You mentioned the influence or the trailblazing for bands like A Tribe Called Red. I'm a fan of theirs as well. So how would you introduce them to Robbie Robertson?
I think a lot of his solo work was quite different than the band. They're really very different chapters. Nothing he did later in life resembled the band, which I think speaks to his curiosity.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to me that two people brought up the Red Boy record, which, again, I don't think was very popular, but those that heard it,
deep cuts, yeah,
really felt a resonance with it. And he was very interested in storytelling. He was a big cinema buff, and you mentioned your favorite song, Somewhere Down the Crazy River.
Yes.
I think that's what he was going for. He wanted to create like a mini audio drama in that song. He collaborated for the last 40 years with Martin Scorsese. So that was part of what he wanted to do. But back to what we were saying about Night They Drove Dixie Down, it's a narrative song. And I think that it's meant to be like a short story about a character. And that's not common in pop songwriting. And a lot of his lyrics are abstract and a bit hard to grasp, but other ones are very much character portraits, like even kind of the drunken buffoon in Up on Cripple Creek, or a song like The Weight that people for generations have tried to figure out what it means and who are these characters in this song. And who is Annie and what is the load? And
you know what? We actually have The Weight lined up right now. Michael Barkley, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for talking about this today.
Oh, absolutely. Music journalist Michael Barkley. And we're going to close with The Weight by the band. Thanks so much for listening and watching.
Just feeling about half past dead. Just need to find a place